Chapter 49, Starlight Arrows. The two gangs had marched more than half a month before they reached a mountain Han Sen had never been to. On the way, Han Sen had truly understood there was strength in numbers. No creatures could block their path with the rain of arrows from the archers and the charge of the cavalry. Of course, the scouts would inform them if there were herds of strong creatures ahead of them and they would take a detour. At the destination, Bullseye hit on a cliff and was ready to shoot the sacred blood creature drawn out by Luo Tianyang's team. The rest went under the cliff and was ready to chase the creature. In addition to Bullseye, Son of Heaven and his henchmen also stayed on the cliff. Han Sen knew they must also be good at archery because he had witnessed Son of God almost killing the bloody slayer with an arrow before he snatched its beast soul. Son of Heaven looked at Han Sen coldly as he had heard rumors about Han Sen being Qin Xian's boy toy, which annoyed him. Son of Heaven, where are the arrows you've agreed to offer? Asked Yang Manli. It was Bullseye that Son of Heaven really needed this time. As normal arrows wouldn't harm a sacred blood creature at all, and Z-steel arrows were too expensive, Son of Heaven had agreed to provide Bullseye with the arrows needed this time. Son of Heaven smiled and waved his hand. His henchmen then carried a box down from the back of a mount. They opened the box and it was filled with starlight arrows, each worth more than 1,000,000. It was made by Starry Group with 1% Z-steel. Manli, here are 100 starlight arrows we agreed on. Would you distribute them among your best archers? Son of Heaven smiled. Yang Manli turned around and started calling out names. She had good arrows herself, so did Lu Hongtao. Hence, she planned to pick 5 other members of Bullseye out to use the starlight arrows. Soon she had 4 people picked out and with some thought, she looked at Han Sen and Yu. Han Sen was slightly surprised, as he did not expect Yang Manli to choose himself. But this was a good thing, and Han Sen quickly stepped up and stood together with the other 4. While Yang Manli was preparing to distribute the arrows among the 5, Son of Heaven suddenly said grimly, Manli, are you sure about the archers? What is the problem? Yang Manli looked to Son of Heaven. How is someone like him qualified to use the starlight arrows? Asked Son of Heaven coldly, pointing to Han Sen. I chose him, and that's why he's qualified, replied Yang Manli. Son of Heaven looked at Han Sen disgustedly and said to Yang Manli, I am not questioning your decision, but this person just will not do. Please replace him. Yang Manli frowned, but she knew this campaign was dominated by Son of Heaven, since he had provided everything. Bullseye was just here to help. So, she couldn't refuse him. Zhao Hua, come here. Yang Manli had to let Han Sen return to the team, and called out another name. Son of Heaven continued to stare at Han Sen coldly. Sen, you are really unlucky. You had the opportunity to get 20 starlight arrows and kill the sacred blood creature. Now it's all gone, said Su Xiaoqiao with regret. Han Sen shrugged. Although it was a shame he didn't get the 20 starlight arrows, he had an even stronger arrow in his quiver. He still had a chance. The archers each took position on the cliff and prepared their bows and arrows, waiting for the sacred blood creature to fly out from below. Han Sen and Su Xiaoqiao found a comfortable spot and Son of Heaven suddenly walked over and said, What are you useless scums doing here? Go away. Then, Son of Heaven's henchmen shoved Han Sen and Su Xiaoqiao aside. Su Xiaoqiao fiercely stared at them with anger. Han Sen tugged on his arm and said, It doesn't matter. Let's go over there. They are pushing too far, said Su Xiaoqiao bitterly. Revenge is a dish best served cold. Just wait until you see Son of Heaven's face when we kill the sacred blood creature, smiled Han Sen while walking to the other side with Su Xiaoqiao. It's not that easy. This cliff is wide and Son of Heaven's men are waiting on the other side. If the sacred blood creature went to their side, it would be too far from us. Even if it were only 300 feet from us, we couldn't even injure it without starlight arrows. Basically, we are just a decoy, a distraction, Su Xiaoqiao smiled wryly. You have money. Why didn't you buy a few starlight arrows? Han Sen looked at Xiaoqiao puzzled. He remembered Su Xiaoqiao to be very rich. 1 million should be nothing for him. What do I need those for? It's outrageously expensive and you may not even be able to recover it. 1 million each, and you probably need to shoot 7 or 8 before you could hit something. No guarantee of killing anything either. I'd rather spend the money purchasing mutant creature meat. Then Su Xiaoqiao lowered his voice and said, now Z-Steel is extremely overvalued. As the young master of Starry Group, Son of Heaven owns mines and factories of Z-Steel. So, he doesn't need to spend much on these arrows, as the cost of each arrow is at most 10,000. Such huge profits? Han Sen was surprised. Well, now Z-Steel mines have been monopolized by a few groups. Also, the manufacturing technologies are not ready for producing alpha alloy with more than 5% Z-Steel. For some reason, the alpha alloy will become as brittle as glass if Z-Steel content exceeds 5%. Su Xiaoqiao explained to the Han Sen. While the two were chatting, they suddenly heard a howling like dragon under the cliff. Grabbing their bows, they looked down from the cliff. Chapter 50, Siege. Such a gigantic lizard. Su Xiaoqiao saw the creature under the cliff and let out a cry. Han Sen also saw what the sacred blood creature looked like, a huge lizard covered in purple scales, flying out from the deep valley with a pair of feathered wings. The sacred blood creature was closer to where Han Sen was, but still about 250 feet away. With the order of Yang Manli, everyone started shooting down at the sacred blood creature that was trying to fly up from the valley. The arrows rained on it but couldn't even hurt the feathers on its wings, let alone the scales on its body. Even the starlight arrows could only leave some sparks before they fell. As the tips of the arrows were turned, its features remained intact. Han Sen had already put his arrow with 1.2% Z-Steel on the bow, but did not shoot it out. This was the only arrow he had and it would be useless if he didn't have the best angle. Its feathers and scales were too tough. Our arrows are useless unless we could shoot it in the eyes. Su Xiaoqiao also shot a few arrows, which were completely wasted. As Su Xiaoqiao was talking, Son of Heaven had summoned his eagle beast soul bow and a beast soul arrow in the shape of a wolf tooth. Aiming at a wing of the sacred blood creature, Son of Heaven made his shot. Han Sen saw that the beast soul arrow Son of Heaven used this time was much inferior to the sacred blood six-winged wasp arrow he used last time, so it must either be a mutant or primitive beast soul. The beast soul arrow flew across the sky like a black lightning bolt, cut through the purple feathers and nailed on the wing of the creature, making the creature utter a roar. Yang Manli also summoned a white pigeon-like beast soul bow, along with a blue swordfish-like beast soul arrow. As she made the shot, the arrow also pierced the purple feathers and blood started to flow down the arrow. Neither Son of Heaven's arrow nor Manli's arrow was one use this time. After the arrows hit the target, they summoned them back to their hands. This means infinite arrows. Beast soul arrows are so much better than Z-Steel arrows in this sense. Han Sen was green with envy, wishing he could grab the beast soul arrow from Son of Heaven's hands. It must be a mutant beast soul, or else it wouldn't have penetrated the wing of a sacred blood creature so easily. Son of Heaven and Yang Manli both knew the wings were the weakest part of the creature and aimed again at its wings. The creature took another 2 shots and flew away from the cliff. Son of Heaven's beast soul bow was obviously stronger than Doomsday. When he made a shot 600 feet away from the creature, the arrow still went through its wing. Everyone was desperately shooting at the creature, while the injuries they made were still not fatal. The creature escaped and flew away. Go after it. Its wings were hurt so it can't go far. Son of Heaven gave the order and those who had beast soul mounts all summoned their mounts and chased after the creature. Han Sen and others who had no mounts could only follow by running and were soon left behind. After all, those with 2 legs could never outrun those with 4. In a while, they could no longer see the mounts and suddenly heard the thud of hooves. It was Qin Xian and others who were attacking in the valley. Up! Qin Xian called to Han Sen when her mount passed by him. Considering her mount could take a second person and Han Sen was a good archer with Doomsday. Han Sen was delighted and quickly leapt on the mount. He thought his chance had gone, but now Qin Xian would take him, so he had a second chance. Qin Xian followed the hoof prints and went ahead. Sitting behind her, Han Sen had to put his arms around her to keep himself on the mount. She was in beast soul armor, so he couldn't really feel a thing. In addition to the hoof prints, there were also traces of blood on the ground, which must be from the sacred blood creature's wounds, proof that they were in the right direction. After 8 hours of chasing, Qin Xian finally saw Son of Heaven, Yang Manli and others ahead of them. Son of Heaven stopped in front of a mountain, and looked up at the top of the mountain. Qin Xian and Han Sen approached. The mountain was like a sword plugged into the ground, standing at least half a mile high. And the sacred blood creature was crouching on the mountain top, howling from time to time. This mountain is too high. Even the beast soul arrows couldn't possibly hurt the creature. Seeing Qin Xian, Yang Manli said. Son of Heaven also looked to Qin Xian and saw Han Sen sitting behind Qin Xian with arms around her waist. Suddenly he had an urge to kill Han Sen. We must try to climb up to kill it as soon as possible, or we can chase it down. With the self-healing ability of a sacred blood creature, its wounds will heal in a few hours and we could no longer kill it by then, said Qin Xian, staring at the mountain top. Then we will climb up and kill it. Son of Heaven put away his mount. This mountain is too steep. If we were attacked halfway, we would die, Yang Manli objected. We could send a few people up and we will watch here. If it attacked, we would shoot it dead, Son of Heaven said calmly. Who should go up? Qin Xian looked at Son of Heaven and frowned. Obviously, whoever going up will be in great danger and no one would not want to take the risk. Only Manli and I could threaten it with arrows. And we need you, Qin Xian, to stay and give orders. The rest should all go up. We've come too far to give up. Whoever goes up can have a bigger share of its meat, so it is fair, right? Son of Heaven's gaze swept across the faces of the men in front of him and turned cold when it met Han Sen. Chapter 51, My Beast Soul. Son of Heaven's proposal was a risky one, but it was indeed their best chance to kill the sacred blood creature. The creature was now lying on the mountain top bleeding, its wings hardly moving. If they missed this opportunity, they might never be able to kill it. Finally, Qin Xian agreed with Son of Heaven, but she decided to go up the mountain, leaving Son of Heaven and Yang Manli, the only 2 mutant beast soul arrow owners, at the foot of the mountain. Xian, no need to go up yourself. Just give orders from down here, Son of Heaven advised. There are no orders to be given. Since I have no mutant beast soul arrow, I might as well go up. Qin Xian started climbing as she spoke. The crowd was divided into 7 groups, and each group was climbing toward the mountain top from a different direction. Han Sen immediately followed Qin Xian. He noticed Son of Heaven's cold stare at him and knew Son of Heaven was about to stab him in the back. Probably it would be Han Sen himself instead of the sacred blood creature who got shot at first. Hence Han Sen had made up his mind to follow Qin Xian everywhere, so that Son of Heaven had no chance to play dirty. Indeed, Han Sen was right. Son of Heaven had the idea of shooting Han Sen dead from the moment he proposed everyone to climb up. On the slope, Han Sen would have nowhere to hide and thus be doomed. But now Han Sen was always following Qin Xian. If Son of Heaven made any move, Qin Xian would save Han Sen for sure. However, Son of Heaven didn't give up just for this. Instead, he now had an even stronger desire to kill Han Senator. All he needed was a moment when Qin Xian went away from Han Sen. Although the slope was steep, the groups were all equipped with a full set of climbing tools and they soon climbed halfway. The sacred blood creature was severely hurt. When it noticed the climbers, all it could do was howling at them as it was unable to go down and attack or fly away. As Qin Xian and others approached the top of the mountain, the creature tried to fly away by flapping its blood-stained wings, while it immediately fell. All groups were overjoyed and started to shoot at it with arrows. Although they couldn't harm the creature, it was infuriated. Suddenly, the sacred blood creature flapped its injured wings and pounced on the closest man. The man had no place to hide on the slope and helplessly hacked his blade at the sacred blood creature. His blade cut the creature on the head but didn't even leave a trace on its scales. The man himself was bitten by the sacred blood creature and torn into 2 halves. His blood sprayed everywhere, which scared people off. Everyone started to climb down. It would be hard to go down the mountain, but luckily they had secured ropes on the slope when they were climbing up. Everyone just ended up using the ropes to slide down. Seeing the sacred blood creature being lured down and madly chasing after the climbers, Son of Heaven and Yang Manli quickly raised their bows and continuously shot their arrows at the creature. Son of Heaven shot 2 arrows and both missed. He was more interested in shooting at Han Sen than the creature. However, Han Sen was sly and kept following Qin Xian, giving him no chance to make an insidious attack. Coward! Son of Heaven secretly cursed and again shot at the sacred blood creature. At this point, everyone knew that the sacred blood creature was a spent bullet. It had bled too much and could hardly fly. If it came down now, it wouldn't be able to fly back up. Despite the casualties, they were going to kill this sacred blood creature. Not able to find a chance to kill Han Sen, Son of Heaven had to take it out on the sacred blood creature. Arrow after arrow, the sacred blood creature was in more pain and howled harshly. Flapping its bleeding wings, the creature wanted to return to the mountain top, but it was hurt too badly to fly. With its desperate flapping, it was still falling. Suddenly, it flew to the slope and gripped on a stone with its claws as its fingers cut 4 holes in the stone as if it were butter. The sacred blood creature gripped harder and started to climb up the mountain. We cannot let it climb up. Qin Xian summoned her beast soul and shape-shifted into a golden lion, climbing up using the holes left by the creature. Han Sen was anxious. If Qin Xian went away, he would become the target of Son of Heaven. Han Sen reached out to grab the lion's tail and was suddenly dragged up. Qin Xian gave him a fierce gaze, but he pretended not having seen it and still held on to her tail. Qin Xian had no time to beat Han Sen up and just chased after the creature at full speed. Seeing the sacred blood creature going out of his shooting range, Son of Heaven put away his bow and arrows and suddenly shape-shifted into a black ape more than 9 feet tall. Son of Heaven quickly ran to the slope and started climbing at a speed much faster than the other climbers. It was as if he were running on the ground. "Let go!" cried Qin Xian. She couldn't keep up with the sacred blood creature as Han Sen was tugging at her tail. Han Sen quickly let go of her tail. Son of Heaven was in a rush to kill the sacred blood creature, so he had no time to harm Han Sen. Son of Heaven is a real asshole. He has such a strong mutant beast soul, yet he still sent us up and put us in danger. Han Sen felt jealous as he saw the ape climbing up at an incredible speed. He did have the bloody slayer, but its strengths were its galloping speed on the ground and the dexterity of its human hands. For mountains as steep as this one, the bloody slayer could never climb up with its 4 hooves. Son of Heaven soon went ahead of Qin Xian the golden lion and was directly behind the sacred blood creature. The creature that was already on the mountain top clawed at Son of Heaven as it saw him. Chapter 52, Purple-Winged Dragon. Han Sen found a place that was not so steep and held Doomsday in both hands while watching the fight on the mountain top. Pulling out a skyfall arrow from his quiver, he shot it at the sacred blood creature. He barely hurt the sacred blood creature with his arrows and 2 were shot at Son of Heaven who was fighting the sacred blood creature. Of course, Skyfall arrows wouldn't hurt Son of Heaven either. It was so badly made that it wouldn't even pierce the skin of mutant creatures. Han Sen was just warming up. After all, he only had one Z-steel arrow and wanted to make sure he would succeed with it. Damn it! Do not shoot if you don't know how to use your bow. Put away your useless arrows, growled Son of Heaven, who had been shot twice by Han Sen. Qin Xian rushed to the top and started to attack the sacred blood creature. Others also climbed back to the top and started shooting at the creature. Although the sacred blood creature was dying, it was still powerful. Howling on the mountain top, it forced everyone back. Neither Son of Heaven nor Qin Xian could approach it. Suddenly, Son of Heaven shape-shifted back into his own body. He had only shape-shifted for an hour, although he could have shape-shifted longer than that with his Geno points. As Han Sen was wondering what Son of Heaven was trying to do, he saw Son of Heaven summoning his red beast soul sword and slashing it at a bloody wing of the creature. Qin Xian also shape-shifted back into herself, summoned her malicious butterfly dagger, and stabbed it at the creature. Several others on the mountain top also used their own weapons to attack the sacred blood creature. The creature was injured heavily and Son of Heaven made a foot-long wound on its wing. The creature was bathed in its own blood. Qin Xian took the chance to stab her dagger into the creature's wound and its blood suddenly turned black as it was poisoned by the dagger. Attack harder. It is almost dead, yelled someone. And then everyone stepped up their game. Han Sen saw clearly from where he was standing that the henchmen of Son of Heaven did have incredible skills. They moved around on the slope as though they were walking on flat ground. If they hadn't been there to distract the creature, Son of Heaven and Qin Xian would not have succeeded so easily. Seeing that the sacred blood creature was almost gone, Han Sen grabbed Doomsday and stared at the creature, looking for a chance to make the shot. If he made the last attack before the creature died, he would have an opportunity to gain its beast soul. Although the chance was very slim, an opportunity was still better than nothing. Son of Heaven took the risk and climbed up himself for the last attack as well. Whoever made the last hit could keep the beast soul for him or herself. That was a default rule in the shelter. The reason was that only those who made the last attack would know if they had gained the beast soul or not. And no one would know if they were lying. Crack! Son of Heaven's sword was slashed into the neck of the creature and made a cut so deep its bones were exposed. More blood started to gush out. The creature once again suffered a fatal hit and went mad. It gathered all its strength and swept its wings across the crowd, forcing everyone to back off. Trembling, it flew up again toward a different mountain. Everyone knew from how bad it was bleeding that it was going to die very soon. Son of Heaven quickly summoned his own mutant beast soul bow and arrow, shooting at the creature in the sky. The arrow penetrated its wing. The sacred blood creature couldn't take it anymore and started to fall with its wings helplessly flapping. It was falling too fast and it was too late for others to shoot at it. Son of Heaven was overjoyed, as even if the sacred blood creature fell and died, he was still the one who attacked last and had a chance at its beast soul. Suddenly, an alloy arrow was shot from the slope and disappeared in the creature's wounded neck. Son of Heaven suddenly raged. And everyone else was shocked. In the blink of an eye, the sacred blood creature had fallen at the foot of the mountain and died. Sacred blood creature purple-winged dragon killed. Sacred blood beast soul of purple-winged dragon gained. Eat the flesh of purple-winged dragon to gain 0 to 10 sacred blood Geno points randomly. The voice sounded in Han Sen's mind. Han Sen almost shed tears for happiness. However, he managed to fake disappointment, helplessness and frustration. Everyone on the mountain top was looking at him, especially Son of Heaven. If he could kill with his sight, Han Sen must have died a million deaths. Although there was the default rule, Han Sen made up his mind not to admit he had gained the beast soul. Or Son of Heaven would definitely kill him. People who saw his disappointed look did not entirely buy it, but did feel better somehow. After everyone had come down from the mountain, Son of Heaven seized Han Sen's collar and asked, "Have you got the beast soul?" No, Han Sen insisted that he had gained nothing. Son of Heaven was skeptical and tried to beat Han Sen up, but Qin Xian stopped him. "Son of Heaven, my guy broke no rules. He said he didn't get it. And even if he did, you have no right to ask him to hand it over to you," said Qin Xian, her face grim. Han Sen was in her gang. If he was beat up by Son of Heaven, she would have no authority in the future. Son of Heaven stared at Han Sen for a long time before he walked toward the dead body of the purple-winged dragon, pulled out Han Sen's arrow, and snapped it into 2 halves. Chapter 53, Sacred Blood Copper-Toothed Beast. After wrapping up the dead body of the purple-winged dragon, everyone returned to Steel Armor Sanctuary and Qin Xian called Han Sen into her office. "Did you get the beast soul?" Qin Xian stared at Han Sen. "Station Master, I really did not get the beast soul. Had I known this I would never have shot the arrow," said Han Sen wryly. Qin Xian didn't believe him. "Stop acting. If you have gained the beast soul, I will not take advantage you either. If you want to sell it, I'm willing to pay. I can even pay you up front." "Station Master, I'd be a fool if I don't want to earn the money. I really did not get the beast soul. If I could show you I would." Han Sen looked depressed. Qin Xian felt Han Sen's emotions were authentic. She frowned and said to him, "Forget about it then. Do not go anywhere alone and stay in Bullseye these days. Son of Heaven might try to kill you." "I will behave," Han Sen nodded. Back to Bullseye, Su Xiaoqiao put his arm around Han Sen's neck and asked, "Sen, I heard that you made the last attack. Did you get the beast soul?" "I wish, but unfortunately I don't even own a primitive beast soul, let alone a sacred blood one," Han Sen shrugged and said. "Right. Beast souls are very hard to come by. We can't all be as lucky as Dollar," Su Xiaoqiao sighed and said. He did not have too much doubt. After all, the probability of gaining a beast soul was too low. "Recently you must be careful not to leave the shelter. Although you did not get the beast soul, Son of Heaven wouldn't let you off the hook easily," said Su Xiaoqiao. "I know." Han Sen patted Su Xiaoqiao on the shoulder, thinking, he seems a nice guy. Back in his room, Han Sen could not help but smiled and started to review his new beast soul. Type of sacred blood purple-winged dragon's beast soul, flying. The introduction was brief, but reminded Han Sen of so much he had heard about this type of beast soul. A flying beast soul meant the beast soul could turn into wings that could give its owner the ability to fly like a bird. Flying across the sky without the need for tools such as aircrafts was certainly a dream coming true. The most important part was that with the ability to fly, one's survival would become so much easier in God's sanctuary. A flying beast soul also allowed one to go where ordinary people couldn't reach. Flying beast souls were super expensive, even more so than the shape-shifting beast soul of the same level. Also, flying beast souls were so rare in God's sanctuary that you might not even be able to buy one even if you had the money. Amazing! A sacred blood flying beast soul. I wonder how many of these exist in the entire first God sanctuary. Han Sen was so excited that he almost jumped up. Primitive flying beast souls had a low speed and didn't allow the users to go very high. It could only bring people 10 feet above the ground. Mutant flying beast souls were better but still slow and clumsy. Sacred blood flying beast souls were much better than the others. But Han Sen had never seen even mutant flying beast souls in Steel Armor Sanctuary. Of course, this had something to do with the fact that there were less flying creatures near Steel Armor Shelter. The room was too small for Han Sen to summon the wings. When he calmed down from excitement, his eye fell on the copper-toothed beast that had turned completely purple and shiny as if it had been polished. Sacred blood. The copper-toothed beast has evolved into a sacred blood creature, Han Sen was filled with unspeakable joy, staring at the beast. For 3 months, Han Sen had been anxious about the result, but now he knew it for sure. Every 3 months, he could have a creature evolved into a sacred blood creature. If the words got out, everyone would go crazy. Like today, it was so hard for such a huge group of people to hunt a purple-winged dragon. And after it was killed, every member in the group would share its meat. Son of Heaven's gang would have a bigger share, and Qin Xian's gang would have the rest. After everyone got their own part, how many geno points can a small part of the entire body offer? Hunting that cost a lot of resources and effort like this one would happen at most once per month, and the success rate would be at most 50%. Yet Han Sen could have the meat of an entire sacred blood creature all to himself every 3 months. Son of Heaven and Qin Xian were both several years older than Han Sen, but they still hadn't evolved to enter Second God's Sanctuary, which meant maxing out on sacred geno points took a lot of time and effort. Behind Son of Heaven was Starry Group, and behind Qin Xian was the military. Even they were not able to max out on sacred geno points within 10 years. It might take them 15 years or even longer if they had bad luck. Now with the black crystal, Han Sen only needed at most 5 years to evolve with max sacred geno points. Han Sen's first reaction was not to kill the copper-toothed beast and eat its meat, but to go to the square to buy a living primitive creature. He did not want to waste any time before he started to feed the next sacred blood creature. Also, he didn't dare to go out hunting, fearing Son of Heaven's revenge. Taking the primitive creature he had bought back to his room, Han Sen didn't hesitate before he killed the sacred blood copper-toothed beast. It was far less strong than a wild sacred blood creature and was easily slaughtered. Sacred blood copper-toothed beast killed. No beast soul gained. Eat its meat to gain 1 to 10 sacred geno points randomly. Although there was no beast soul gained, Han Sen was still over the moon. He quickly set up a pot and was ready to make a stew.